Alright, so we're going to explore the intricacies with guitars and bass and how they relate to each other and all the sort of things in more of a modern metal sense, less traditional. And we're going to we're going to touch on that briefly just so we can understand the problem with modern metal and how we can fix it based on... Okay, so we're going to get... So let's talk of a more traditional sense of guitar playing, something like as far back as Metallica or even Nirvana, something very basic, very simple type riff, and we're gonna see how the guitar and bass relate in that style of music. So let me just write something. All right, so that's the riff. Good enough, I guess. And what we're going to do is same thing we've been doing for thousands of years. We're going to double track it. Double tracking is, of course, the act of recording it twice, panning one to one side, panning it to the other to make a stereo sound. So let me just... let's see. There we go. So that's a basic riff, kind of boring, but let's see how we would add bass to this. So let me get that real quick. Eesh, he's a big boy. All right. So essentially what we're doing here is taking the main riff here, which is a bunch of power chords and normal notes, and we're converting that an octave down, essentially. So instead of doing... That doesn't make a whole lot of sense on bass. You don't need all those extra notes. We just want the root, and then the other root, and then follow anywhere else from there. That's obviously not mixed at all, but you kind of get a good idea, like, oh, okay, so we have a riff, we bring it down an octave, and we play it on a bass, and that's how we usually make music. Now let's try to focus on a more modern approach, and let's try the modern approach with the old school approach. So let's get a... Hold on. So we have a more modern guitar compared to the one before, even though the other one was kind of modern. But this is an 8-string guitar. It's pretty standard for the kind of aggressive music that I'd be making. So let's see... let's take the same approach. Let's just make a riff and then add bass to it. So let's see if I can come up with something. All right, that's a riff. So let's check it out here. Kind of sucks, but it doesn't really matter. So let's do the same thing. We're gonna double track it by making 2 of them, and we can technically do different recording, but I'll just do this because I'm lazy. And whoops, if I did that properly. Here we go. All right, now let's get our bass and do the same thing an octave lower. So the original octave is right here. Wait a minute. Well, that's weird. We can't go an octave lower. There's not enough strings, and even if I had a 5-string bass, it only goes down to B, and we're going down to F sharp. So what's the problem here? Why don't we have low enough notes? Well, we can fix this problem by, instead of using a real instrument with real limitations, we can just use a fake instrument, like a synth or Euro Bass 3. So let me get that up real quick. All right, so I took the liberty of making a tiny little stupid synth and writing the exact same part in, and I put it down an octave, and now let's see how it sounds. What was that? That sounded bad. What's going on here? We brought it down an octave, so why isn't it working? Well, the problem is it's gone down too low to the point where you can't hear it anymore. It's basically inaudible to human ears, which kind of sucks. So what are we going to do now? We can't have a bass that's lower because it's already the bass. We've brought the guitars so low down, they are literally the exact same pitch as the bass. So you might think at this point, why not just use guitars? Why have bass in the first place? There's a very good reason for that, and it's because we won't have good bass. And what I mean by good bass is, in music, there's stereo-ness. There's a left and a right speaker. And this is good because it, makes music interesting. It's like, right? The problem is when it comes to bass, is because when you get stereo bass, especially in like a club setting or you're super raving, it's absolutely abysmal. All you hear is and then you have all phasing issues. But how does this relate to guitar? Well, the guitars are tuned to the same note as the bass, technically. But that doesn't mean that they're the same. They're not equal. Bass, guitar, or in this case, this bass synth here, is perfect. It's straight in the middle, and it makes a good fundamental bass note. Guitars here make weird flubby ones that are all over the place. So when you're writing, you're not using the bass as a lower octave. You're using the bass to make a better fundamental note that your guitars can't reproduce in the exact same way. So let's rewrite it so that instead of being all the way down here to make inaudible garbage, just bring it up an octave. Let's hear how that sounds. Wow, actually audible. Now let's listen to it with guitars. I mean, that obviously sounds terrible because it's not mixed or mastered or in any way good sounding. But you see, in fact, we can probably just cut off some of this low in the guitars entirely and just have... Again, this sounds awful, but the general idea is still there. Instead of having your guitars play this low note that's hard to reproduce and gets all weird stereo-wise, you have the bass do it. That's what I didn't get. I remember when I first started making it, I would just be like, why have bass when you have guitar at the same note? It's because bass is a different instrument, and a bass is needed in this music. And you know all the jokes. You think like metal band, and it's just like the guitarists are going crazy, the drummers are going ham, and then the bassist left for a drink because he's not ever heard or needed. But that's not true. That's very, very not true. If we didn't have basses in any good music, it would sound terrible. See, let's actually get an example of a song I've made and see how it actually works. So this is a song I'm working on pretty recently. Sounds like not terrible, believe it or not. So let's take a look at these guitars first. So if we look at the spectrum analyzer, we'll see it's like kind of this area and this area, and that's where the guitar stands. Now let's check bass. See, it takes up that region. It takes up the bass region. So the guitars and the bass are technically playing the same note, but the bass is handling the bass, and then the guitars are handling the stereo wideness and upper register. And together, they sound good. right? One of the things I do want to address really quickly is the different kinds of basses for this kind of music. So this is what I would call a hybrid. So I have a real bass here. Come on, Conat, open, please. Thank you. Come on, Conat, I paid. Okay. So we have Eurobass 3 here, and let's just hear how Eurobass is sounding. All right, that sounds like a cool bass, pretty good bass tone. But we also have this, which is a synth. It's actually just adding pretty much just a sub plus some extra harmonics that are there for funnies. So that's what we call a hybrid in my mind, where it's a real bass, I swear, I showed you the real one. I know how to play it. This is just easier. So we have a real bass and then a synth bass. And then you can obviously use just real. When I think of that, I think of like Mick Gordon's Metal Hell from Doom Eternal. Let's check it out. So that sounds a lot more like a real bass being played, and it probably has some synthesis to it as well, but I didn't know, I didn't make it. But that sounds more real, and you'd use that as like in that song. It's a very organic sort of wow wow. There's chains, and it's all kind of. It doesn't need to be on the grid. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's not synthesized. It's specifically made to sound more organic, and it uses a real bass for that. And then when you want a more consistent, a more like D, something heavily electronic, you'd go for, obviously, a synthesized bass. When I think of that, I actually think of like, here, let me get it up. I think of this song by Jeffrey Day. It uses a completely synthesized bass. And let's check it out real quick. So in that one, the guitars are a lot more choppy. They're very obviously digital in the way that they're presented. And the bass complements that by being literally digital. And so it's not that one's better than the other. It's completely due to choice. And like, for instance, this one, it's incredibly heavy, but I still want some of that realness to it. I have a real drum kit. I have a real guitar. So I have a real bass, but with some synthesis in it to help with the feel of the track. And that's completely up to discretion. All right, so what have we learned? So we learned that guitars that are tuned as low as basses need to focus on being the higher part, being the upper register of the sound. And the bass is playing the same note as with them, but they're covering the lower register of the sound. And they combine together to make big sound. And there's multiple different ways you can accomplish that, and I can specifically go into like this one, like, whoa, we got a bias effects. What's in here? We got a loading, apparently. We got lots of loading, regular kind of stuff. Oh, God, get the frick. Oh, my God. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think next I probably want to touch on drums. It would be my biggest concern after this. And after drums, definitely the most important part, which is a bunch of sound design and background noise and transitions and all of this fun stuff that makes the music actually hit hard. So yeah, incorporate the having good bass and guitar in your next track maybe, and yeah, that's it. See ya.